Hi, I will be answering a discussion question. The first question was on the key roles of federal and state government in higher education. First, the key role of federal government in higher education is to provide funding. And this is one of the key roles that I want to highlight. Basically, providing funding for students to have equal access to education. Pell Grant, Hope Grant, and basically helps a student to have access to the education they probably wouldn't have access to otherwise. Also, the federal government provides funding for research for the institution, for the faculty and staff of that institution. Key roles of state government. State government provides the framework and the policy. There is a guideline to follow for each institution, and that is provided by the state government through the framework, and the policy is provided by the coordinating board of each state for each institution, public or private, to follow, and also make sure that each institution adheres to these different policies. So, is this helpful or is it a hindrance? Well, let's first talk about how intervention of federal government and state government is helpful. Definitely, many students can attest to the fact that if it were not for the funds that were provided, they probably wouldn't have an education. So definitely that's helpful. But in a way that it's a hindrance, if these students take out these loans and they don't know the consequences, I think there needs to be a greater effort made to let these students know what the consequences are of them taking out this money and not paying it back, or not having the adequate resources to pay that money back. And if that is to happen or was to happen, then how will this affect their credit? How will this affect their future ability to take out loans for their education? So it's important for the student. I know that there's the entrance counseling and the exit counseling, but I don't know how much of that is rooted within that student so that they really understand. So I do think a greater effort should be made. Also, I think that the funding that some states, or how the funding is provided, for instance, performance-based funding. A lot of states are going to performance-based funding, and this is funding given based on the institution's graduation rates or retention rates. And so when that pressure to keep the funding coming is upon the administrators and the faculty and the staff of the institution, I think a lot of times, not always, but sometimes this gives way to unscrupulous behavior to keep these numbers coming or keep the funding coming. Because if the funding doesn't come, and if you're not performing and your funding doesn't come, then eventually, if you have no funding, your institution ceases to exist. So that's a way that it's a hindrance. And that's my answer to the discussion question. I look forward to hearing your responses.